The one thing that I get annoyed with is that, women still control the narrative in mainstream media when it comes to many things in society. And the idea is that everything is the man's fault, and it comes from this trend. It's the men's fault for the divorce because the women aren't happy. You men are solely responsible for making a woman happy. It's men's fault for single mothers because men don't stay. And when it comes to parenting, the narrative has created the myth that fathers are not needed and that mothers are superior to parents, superior parents to fathers because they're women. This has put all of the accountability for childhood trauma on fathers while letting mothers get away with everything. Professionals and influencers always talk about daddy issues and the shortcomings of their fathers, but they never talk about the traumas that mothers inflict on their own children. That is what we are going to talk about on today's show. Mother trauma. Mother trauma refers to the psychological and emotional harm experienced by a child due to the mother's neglect or actions. This can include a wide range of expressions such as physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, neglect, abandonment, and witnessing domestic violence. Mother trauma can have the longest lasting effects on a child that can include anxiety and depression, low self-esteem and insecurity, difficulty with attachment and relationships, trust issues, problems with intimacy, substance abuse, and eating disorders. These effects are only made worse by the mother's inability to take accountability for the harm that they've done to their child. If the child asks any questions about how their mother treated them when they got older, they will usually get gaslit and lied to. Mothers that have inflicted mother wounds on their children will, number one, they'll deny it happened. We have Casey Anthony on TikTok now. That woman murdered her child and is denying that it happened. And this isn't unique to Casey Anthony. Women do terrible things to their children, and when they get older it's like they get offended when you remember. It's like, Mom, do you remember when you did that? And then they get mad at you like you did it. They'll be unwilling to have a conversation about the trauma. They'll rewrite history and use sigh language, shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be right. And what they'll do is they'll lie to save their reputation to themselves, their children, and other members of the family. And any child that wakes up to the mother's manipulation, the mother will make that kid's life a living hell. Mothers that inflict trauma on their child reverse the nurturing contract between themselves and their children. In most circumstances, the mother is supposed to be doing what is necessary to cultivate and reinforce the emotional development of a kid. In cases of mother trauma, the child has to cultivate and reinforce the emotions of their mother. The child must have endless praise on the mother from when they are young and far into adulthood. This leaves the child emotionally and mentally stunted and unprepared for the world as an adult. I hope that one day in the U.S., society judges mothers as harshly as they judge fathers. The mothers can do no wrong culture in America really has got to stop. Giving mothers the benefit of the doubt in all circumstances really needs to stop. She did the best she could, needs to stop. Mothers need to be held accountable for the damage that they are doing to their children. So I'm going to read an article, and it's 10 signs of a narcissistic mother.
Moms are supposed.
Oh, not a video. 1 second, guys. I'm going to play my mixtape again, whether you like it or not, while I get up. Unless my iPad isn't working recently, so I haven't been able to flip the camera. It is what it is. Give me a second. We're going to...
And I'm crying on the bathroom floor, wishing I didn't leave. This love is expired, but I still desire a refill, 'cause you're addictive. Side effects include missing you, loss of appetite, sleepless nights, and trust issues. You're high risk. I'm a love addict. This feeling is fatal.
Okay, now we're gonna, here we go. Friday, guys, my producer is back. I'm so excited. Dear God, I have done the best I can, but I am not meant for this tech stuff. I'm really not.
Supposed to be supportive and nurturing, but what happens when the very woman that should be your number one fan is actually your number one adversary? And if you're like most people, you slip into this confusing, guilt ridden mess. And that's why in today's episode, you're going to learn the 10 signs that your mother is a narcissist. And these are the signs that every single one of my students has experienced, but just couldn't make sense of. But I want you to please note that Christianity isn't about just slapping a love label on someone and ignoring all the damage that they caused. And nor is our time together meant to be a mom bashing episode, but rather, I want you to allow God to bring to light what the enemy is trying to keep in darkness. So in doing so, you can now have an accurate assessment of your situation and honor God in your interactions. So let's dive into the 10 signs. And I'm really curious to hear what you think about number 10. Number 1, she sees you as an extension of her. Imagine how someone would feel if they weren't allowed to have their own identity, weren't able to make their own choices without upsetting someone. In my world, that leads to a codependent, performance-driven mess. And narcissistic mothers often live their life through their children. Maybe mom always wanted to be the popular one, so she pushed you to always look pretty. Or she didn't finish college, so now you had to go on to some prestigious school so she can have bragging rights. And most of us moms like to be proud of our children's choices, but narcissistic moms take this to a toxic level. You're a reflection of her, so therefore, you must make choices based on
Narcissistic mothers care more about their reputation than the welfare of their kids. That's generally what it comes down to.
her preferences. Number 2, she's critical. Look, not all critical people are narcissists, but all narcissists are critical. And she likely has something to say about everyone and everything, and in doing so, positions herself as superior. And this can be through overtly criticizing someone or you for their choices, or passive-aggressively making comments about someone else in an attempt to make sure to get the message to you. But ironically, if you have any criticism or complaint about her, you will get met with a toxic reaction, as you are now creating a crack in her fragile facade. And number 3, she has toxic reactions. Look, we can all overreact or react poorly from time to time, but narcissistic mothers will maintain this radioactivity as her MO. And you can likely predict that she will have a defensive, stonewalling, victim-like reaction if you attempt to bring anything to her attention that she doesn't want to hear. And narcissistic mothers cannot and will not look at themselves. So if you challenge her delusion, the response will be radioactive. Nothing is ever her fault, and if you ever try to argue otherwise, you will get met with the victim and martyr. Number 4, she lacks empathy. Narcissistic mothers will fake empathy with their sweet, high-pitched voices and their feigned sincerity, but it's all an act. When push comes to shove, she can't fake it anymore. She doesn't care about what you're going through, especially if it inconveniences her or, worse, pertains to her. And some of these moms have realized just how selfish they appear. So they will make excuses like, oh, I have something so much more devastating to deal with, and thereby making you the problem because you don't now have empathy for what she's going through. And if you've struggled under the weight of a toxic mother and want to break free to all that God has for you, I want to encourage you to check out my online course called the Toxic Mother Survival Course. Or we also have another course called How to Heal from a Toxic Mother, Restoring Your Life Through Faith. I will go ahead and include links in the description section below. And number 5, she doesn't respect your boundaries. Narcissistic mothers do not take no for an answer. Your boundaries are perceived as a personal slight towards her, because after all, I'm your mother. Whether she's sharing your personal information to others or overriding your preferences, she believes that you should cower to her commands. And since narcissistic mothers still view their adult children as young children, they believe wholeheartedly that they have free reign over your life, and you...
Yeah. Fathers will give kids the information and let the children make their own mistakes. Mothers cannot let their kids fail. And if their kids fail, they are not concerned about their kids failing. They're concerned about how it looks on them.
Owe them. And here's where you're going to get met with a manipulative comment like, You're supposed to honor and obey me. Or what kind of Christian treats their mother
that one triggered me. You're supposed to honor me. That's why I hate Christian women. They always do
this way? All of this is in an attempt to disregard your limits and shame you into feeling like a bad person. Number 6, she wears a mask. Narcissistic mothers have several facades that they try to uphold, and this can be done easily for a short period in public, but get behind closed doors in private, and you're going to see that mask slip or fall off completely. Their public persona is in stark contrast to their private one. And this is why it makes your skin crawl when you hear people say, "Oh, your mother's so great. Oh, she's so sweet." And you think, if you only knew. And number 7, she believes that others are jealous of her. Mom having trouble keeping friends long term? No, I'm not talking about those equally toxic girls that she's been friends with since college. I'm talking about a constant revolving door of people in and out of her life. Narcissists can't have genuine connection with others. So when those people end up leaving, which they always do, the narrative that sounds best in her mind is, "Oh, she was just jealous of me." That leads to number 8. She's entitled and self-important. And this trait can be overt or covert. The overt will be a bit more histrionic in her behavior, making overt displays to get attention. Maybe that's dancing inappropriately at a party, or bragging to anyone with an ear, or treating people that she deems inferior like trash. The covert narcissist may not be as obnoxious in her expressions, but make no mistake, she will exude superiority over others. Especially watch for number 10. But first, into number 9. She distorts reality, otherwise known as gaslighting. You can't have a healthy conversation with a narcissistic mother because she is always telling you that you're remembering things wrong. Whether she denies saying or doing something, or just calls you too sensitive when you try to raise an issue, narcissistic mothers don't desire genuine connection. I know they say they do. They desire admiration. And if your questioning her challenges that, she will flip the script on you faster than a fried cook flips hotcakes. And number 10, she has weird facial expressions. Okay, so this one isn't so much proven, but in my experience, I've seen most narcissistic mothers with these almost uncontrollable facial expressions that reveal their contempt for others. From eye rolls to snarky smirks to eye flutters. Can't even do it if I tried. These are all signs of disdain and disapproval towards others. They truly think that they are better than others, including you. Okay, so dare I ask, how many signs have you seen so far? Let me know in the comments below. And did you know that growing up with a narcissistic mother can actually lead to people-pleasing? Where you're always saying yes and I'm sorry?
What is mama trauma, you may ask? I believe it is really what happens to us when we have parents, and oftentimes our primary caregivers, who really do struggle with disorders like borderline, narcissism, their own wounding or mental health issues, maybe, trauma issues. But whatever happens is that over time, it's not a one-time event. It's a chronic, classic CPTSD dynamic where there's chronic interpersonal trauma, often between you and your caregiver, which it may be an auntie or grandmother, but it really is that mother role. And I'm going to make other videos on what I call Papa trauma, which is about trauma with our fathers, but I'm going to finish out this part with mama trauma. So before I get started though, I'm a clinical psychologist, and this channel really focuses on attachment, relationships, childhood trauma, and there seems to be a real interest in terms of understanding our primary caregivers and the wounds they can create in us as children, especially if they are people who struggle with their own disorders. So that is what this whole series about mama trauma will be exploring. Please feel free to click the bell, and that way, if you want to subscribe, you'll get notified when I post new videos. Okay, so this video is really about the top 7 signs, if we're talking about, do I have mama trauma? What does that really mean? There's a certain sort of description of the way we engage with a parent who has chronic relationship issues, being parents who are consistent and stable and available. No parent is perfect, as I literally will keep saying. We all screw up sometimes. But these are parents who can say hurtful things, who can do hurtful things, who are unreliable. And I'm not talking about, like I said, in a certain period of time where we all are struggling. But when you look back over your childhood, there's like a certain way you would describe the relationship. And the odds are very good. Today, you're still in the trauma bond with a parent like this. So if you are wondering, do I really have some mama trauma? These to me are the signs. The first sign is that you would describe your parent, your mother role as challenging, as crazy, as difficult, as unreasonable, as unpredictable. And that would be a label you would use to describe the majority of the time with them. Now, not all of the time with them. As I've said in the videos about borderline moms, with borderlines especially, there can be more of that good love, that good relationship, and so it can feel confusing because it's not always bad. But when you step back and look at it and you start to really understand what healthy parenting looks like, you would describe it as sort of these, labels of, crazy, unusual, intense, challenging, difficult, and things like that. So your mom in general is not the easiest person for probably anyone to deal with, but it especially was not easy for that relationship between the two of you. The next one is that you have a deep core sense of not being good enough, and that is often driven by your perfectionism, being overly critical. I think we all struggle with some degree of worthiness. I mean, it's just part of life and the culture we live in. But if you had a parent who actually told you repeatedly that you weren't good enough, that something was wrong with you, that you were a bad child, and they're still telling you things like this, right? There's never been any change. That might be a sign that there's some trauma in there, especially as related to the worthiness and attachment security that can really help us not feel so much that way. The next one, number 3, is that her love hurts. Her love hurts mentally or physically or emotionally. There's something about the love with her that has a deep wound inside of it. It's not simple. It's not pure. It's not easy to express and understand. And so there's a wound that exists. And the love with her, even if it can be really good at times, it can also be deeply, deeply wounding. Number 4 is that you have some, likely symptoms of CPTSD, especially as your chronic trauma.
Therapists just make up words. She's on to something, but damn, CPTSD
relates to the parenting relationship with your mother or mother caregiver. And that includes everything I discussed in this video, from autoimmune and chronic health issues to mental health issues. It really does vary. There's a lot of things that can go into and manifest in CPTSD. But if you think about the relationship and its chronically difficult nature with your mother, there's a chance you may have some mama trauma. And that really goes into the next one, which is you may actually have physical and mental health symptoms that are ongoing, that are chronic. Everything from these sort of disorders that we can't seem to get a hold of, that they require ongoing treatment and that you tend to and or repeatedly go back to and struggle with, as well as I was saying, what we might find in sort of typical stress-induced chronic medical and physiological health issues. Number 5 is that if you had a mom who, for the most part, you've been embarrassed to tell other people about the things that she did to you, that she said to you, that she did or said to your dad or your siblings, there's just this sort of cringy, uncomfortable nature that you don't really want to share because, for the most part, you don't hear people saying things like that out loud, and or you're embarrassed of the way that she talked to you and treated you. There's a chance that because of her own difficulties and maybe lack of boundaries and her own inability to manage herself, that the way she treated you that was also hurtful or embarrassing is something that you don't want to share with people. And all of it, it just feels really uncomfortable to think about telling someone else what your childhood with this parent was really, truly like.
And that's the thing. There's so many, like, when you talk about your father, you can talk about his flaws and his strengths, and the dads, they'll usually agree with you. The mothers, though, it's like if you say anything, even remotely, that may piss them off, it is like World War III.